After recording One by One, Dave Grohl decided to take a small break from Foo Fighters. He felt that rushing a new album was not a good idea after the troublesome recording of the previous record. In this break, he began to write more acoustically driven music. However, not wanting to write a solo album, he presented these new songs to the rest of the band. The band decided that the new shift in direction was a fantastic idea, but Grohl wanted to stick to the usual rock sound of the band at the time. This is when they decided to create a double album being described as The Bottle and the Hangover, one half containing the usual alternative hard rock sound that we've come to know and love, and the other half containing fully acoustic songs. The band built a new studio in a warehouse in California named Studio 606, named after the nickname given to Grohl's basement during the recording of One by One. After the studio was built, the band recorded 40 new tracks, only keeping 20 of them on the final track list. The album became known as In Your Honor. The band went to the rock record with the intention to make it the most devastating thing they'd done to date, and the acoustic record to be more dynamic and show what the band were truly capable of doing as songwriters. The album received positive reception, although many believed the album to be overly long and considered one of the records to be vastly superior to the other side. My opinion? I'm really mixed, to be honest. I think this album is simultaneously one of the worst and best albums they've ever done. The rock side is by far the worst record they've done to date, and the acoustic side is actually my favorite record they've ever done. That's not to say that the rock side is completely awful or anything. There are some great songs on it. I just feel like they seem to be the most rushed and incomplete songs the band have ever done. But as always, let's go track by track and talk about my opinions on each and every one. The album opens up with the title track, In Your Honor, and right off the bat, this is one of my favourites on the album and possibly my favourite album opener from the band. It starts off with this very atmospheric guitar line and Dave screaming the words at the top of his lungs. The track sounds huge and the build-up makes the rest of the band coming in all the more exciting. The track is not as fast as other tracks, but its sheer explosiveness makes it sound more aggressive and loud than pretty much every single song on One by One. The track gets fast right at the end in this really euphoric and exciting final guitar riff. It's not a track that has big important lyrical meanings behind it. It really is just a fun and exciting song to suck you into the album and hammer in the band's growing arena rock sound. This is the point in the band's career where they started playing some of the biggest venues in the world, and with this track and the rock side of the album, they try and fill out these venues by making the most gigantic and epic sing-alongs that they could ever make. And this is one of them. It's simple yet effective, like most of the band's best songs, and this is easily one of the album's highlights and the best song on the first disc. No Way Back is good, and that's all I can really say about it. I don't think it blows me away or anything. It's not one of the band's best, and it's not one that I really listen to that often. But it's a decent enough rock song with a strong chorus and pretty good guitar riffs. The track is about being controlled by a newly elected government that you didn't elect, which in the political world we're currently in is more relevant than ever. Lyrically, I think the track is really pretty good, and Dave's melodies are catchy and memorable, especially on the chorus, which I think has such a great hook. And there's some really great guitar moments too, including the fantastic solo later on. However, I do feel like the main riff is a little bit lazy. It's incredibly repetitive and doesn't really stand out above the band's best riffs or even the best riffs on the album. But honestly, my biggest problem I have with this track is actually a big problem I have with the rock disc in general. It follows every cliche formula that Foo Fighters songs quite commonly do. Normally, if people criticize the band for being just safe rock and nothing else, I can break the songs down and say why they're more than just that, just like I did with tracks like Everlong and Times Like These. But the tracks on this album, No Way Back included, aren't like this at all. They're very formulaic and don't really have much interesting or unique going for them. It just kind of feels like a filler song where the band tried to mechanically make a song that sounded like Foo Fighters, and because of that I wouldn't really call it anything special. Apart from a few great moments, this song is kind of forgettable. Oh god, I'm gonna get so much hate for this one. Okay, remember how I didn't like All My Life on my previous album review? You know, that song that is one of the band's biggest and most loved songs? Well, I absolutely hate Best of You. I honestly think it's one of the band's worst singles they've done to date. In fact, I almost said that it was their worst, but then I remembered another one that we'll get to later on in this series. issues. But the problem I have is very similar to my problem with No Way Back. This is an undefendable song. It just sounds like a cliche / formulaic rock song. Lyrically, I think this song is fantastic. It's a song about being broken, possibly by an abusive relationship, and how you've had everything inside you robbed, and how now they've completely emptied you, that they've moved on to someone else and is starting the same cycle again. Lyrically, I think this song is beautiful, except for that chorus. The chorus is possibly the most repetitive chorus the band have ever done. Hell, I'd rather listen to the chorus of Run on loop than this one. The instrumentation is okay. I think it's lacking something that it really does need to set it apart from the band's other songs. It doesn't have a catchy and memorable riff, it doesn't have a great solo either. It has nothing really. Everyone just kind of seems to be on autopilot, not really putting in anything really exciting and not having a massive impact. Even at its worst, One by One had some fun and impressive instrumentation. This just sounds like your average modern rock song, and its repetitiveness just makes it almost unbearable for me to listen to. And honestly, I used to love this song like everyone else seems to, but when I really got into the band and saw what they were truly capable of, I realized that this song wasn't as great as I thought it was, and hearing it a few thousand times really ruined this song for me also. But if you like this song, go ahead and like it. I seriously wish I could like this song because a lot of people consider it to be among the band's absolute best, but sadly, I really don't. DOA is a song that I'm not sure about, because I think the instrumentation is really good and I love the chorus. It starts off with this fantastic guitar riff which is easily one of the most memorable on the album, and then there's the verse. The verses are terrible. The verse is so repetitive and uninteresting, which really brings down the rest of the song for me. The song is about getting away from a bad relationship and moving on. In some ways it kind of feels like a follow-up to Best of You, with the next song Hell being the last in this trilogy of connecting songs. The verses don't really do anything for me. They just don't stand out and aren't as catchy as some other verses. But that pre-chorus is beautiful and leads into this fantastic chorus that I think is one of the most memorable on the first album. Like the previous song, it is a very typical Foo Fighters song, but what makes this song different is I think it's a lot more fun, and the fact it doesn't get played everywhere helps also. But this is far from a perfect song. It does very much feel like the sort of filler you'd expect Foo Fighters to do. It's very much in the vein of other filler songs like Wind Up and Living Skin or Lonely As You. It's a lot of fun and has some really great moments, but overall it isn't that great. But yet still, it's much better than Best of You. Hell is a song that I can barely talk about because it's possibly the most unneeded and forgettable song in the band's entire discography. There's nothing interesting about it, it doesn't have any fun moments, it doesn't leave a lasting impact at all. It's just there to pad the album out a bit and get it to 10 tracks. It's a song that really, if you skipped it, you would miss nothing. God, I hate the last song. This song is trying to be that huge anthem where Dave's trying to band everyone together, but it just completely fails in every way. The riffs are uninspired, the chorus is repetitive, and the song never goes anywhere. The melodies aren't anything to write home about, the instrumentation is boring, the song just sounds like a billion other songs that I've heard before. Nothing about this song works, it doesn't do anything for me at all. It's not one that I can listen to a ton of times and enjoy, it's not one that grows. It's just another song that is there to pad the album out. In fact, out of the first 6 tracks, I think the only song that is actually really good is the title track. The rest of it is just either terrible, bland, or just slightly above average. But thankfully, we've heard the absolute worst that this album has to offer. It's all uphill from here. Free Me is one of the best tracks on the Rock album. I really dig this song. It's one of the tracks on the album where the instrumental came first and the lyrics and vocal melodies came afterwards, and I think that is the way that Foo Fighters should write, mostly because most of Dave's post One by One lyrics are terrible, but also because they're a band that when they're at their best are riff heavy and have fantastic instrumentation with vocals that were made to fit in with them. And this is a track with some amazing instrumentation that I think has some of the most standout performances choices on this half of the album. The guitar riff is simple but exciting and epic. I love the switch between the loud distorted riff and the clean guitars in the verse that, although being clean, are still kinda loud and punchy. The guitar riffs are fantastic all throughout, and the bass work on the track is impressive also, which is something I've not really been able to say on this album so far. But the bass sounds beautiful here. It's very crunchy and punchy, and it also creates this very pounding and heavy track. The drums are really pounding also, and later in the track, Taylor throws in these really fantastic fills. If there is one downside to this track, it's its chorus. Similar to tracks like Best of You and The Recent Run, the chorus is very repetitive. The chorus mostly comprises of two lines being repeated over and over again, and after a while it does begin to get boring. Not only do I think this song goes on a little bit too long, it almost clocks in at 5 minutes, and honestly I think it could have lost a minute and it would have been a much better and more exciting and tighter track. But I still do like this song quite a bit, and I think it's one of the better tracks on the rock disc. Resolve is a song that for some reason I've never really listened to a lot, and honestly after listening to it again for this review I need to change this because I think this song is fucking beautiful. It's the only slow moment on the rock album, and just like previous ballads by the band, it has some really great instrumentation and beautiful lyrics. The song is undoubtedly about Kurt Cobain. I try not to get involved with rumors about the meanings behind songs, and usually only really say what the songs are about if the lyricist has actually publicly said what they're about. But there is no denying that this song is about how Dave felt after the death of Kurt. The references in this track are too obvious to deny, and lyrically I think this song is pretty honest and at times heartbreaking. Dave sings each line with such power. During the verses it sounds like he's really struggling to get the words out because the lyrics are so powerful to him. Although this song isn't the best song he's ever written about Kurt, we'll actually get to that one later on the album, it's definitely a very powerful and beautiful one. I also think this is one of the best singles on the album, and it's a real shame that it's not remembered as much as songs like Best of You, because this song is just fantastic. It's very subdued and not as loud and epic as the other tracks on the album, but I think it needed to be like this. If Dave was screaming at the top of his lungs like in his other songs, I don't think the emotion of the track would be quite as powerful. I strongly recommend checking out this song. I've wanted to talk about The Deepest Blues Are Black for so long because I think it is criminally underrated. I seriously have heard no one talk about this song, and I don't understand why, because I think it is really good. Even songs like The Last Song get talked about, but this one doesn't, and I have no clue why. It starts off with this beautiful clean riff and some fantastic melodies from Dave, and then when things kick in it gets super exciting and epic with this great close to open guitar chord and almost punk inspired drum line. Then in the chorus everything gets more epic and grand. This song isn't as polished as the rest of the songs on the album. It has a much dirtier and more raw sound, and that really works in its favor, creating a song that sounds unlike any of the other songs on the album. I adore the chord progression in the chorus and how it plays around with a lot of minor chords, creating this very dark and eerie sound, and each instrument sounds like it's had a little bit of reverb put in during the mixing process, making it sound almost like it was all recorded in a small room. It's a nice little juxtaposition to the other tracks on the album that sound much more arena-esque. It's one of the tracks on the rock side that sounds very classic rock inspired. There are moments in the track where it sounds almost like it could have been a really heavy Queen song. Although the guitars may be incredibly simple, I think here they work better than on other tracks, because the melodies of the track is so different and beautiful that you really get sucked up into them and don't really care about the other things. I've always been a fan of these really dark, diminished sounding tracks, and I think this is the only one on the first half of the album that really pulls it off quite this well. It's a beautiful, exciting and raw track, one that I think deserves way more attention than it gets. End Over End is the final track on the first album, and it's another one that for some reason I've not really listened to a lot. In fact, I could barely remember it when starting this review, which I don't really understand because this is actually one of the albums by the band I've listened to the most, so you'd think I'd remember each track vividly. But listening to it again for this review, I think it's a really good final track. It reminds me quite a bit of Come Back from the previous record. It's a very huge, loud and epic track with fantastic instrumentation and a chorus that is catchy, albeit quite repetitive. It starts off with this beautiful guitar riff, which honestly was the only thing I could really remember about the track. Then the track starts to slowly build up until this fantastic blast of energy, noise, and power comes out. The guitar work on the final part of the track is easily the best on the album. In fact, the instrumentation from the entire band is great all throughout. Similar to pretty much every song on this album, it seems to be about a breakup and Dave trying to start over and go back to being himself after the dissolution of the relationship. And lyrically, I think it's pretty good and is one of the few that paints an interesting story really well. However, the chorus is way too repetitive, especially later on in the track where it's repeated non-stop for like a minute or so. To be honest, I think the biggest problem I have with this song is that it kind of feels like it's trying to recreate everything that made Come Back so great. It's a very similar track to that one. The only thing that is missing is the acoustic breakdown. And although it doesn't quite reach the heights of Come Back, it does a good job of coming somewhat close. I do think it's a good song and just a fantastic closer, but it just about misses the mark of following up the genius of Come Back. So since In Your Honor is two completely different albums, I've decided to split my review up into two parts. This is so people don't have to watch me talk about the album for longer than needed, and also I felt it made much more sense due to how different each side of the album is. But I promise you won't have to wait ages for the next part. In fact, it should be up in the next couple days. I'm not uploading this part until both are complete and ready to be uploaded, so come back in a couple days to hear my opinions on the second half of In Your Honor.